Welcome to Dylan Has Movies. I'm Dylan. I have movies. In a Violent Nature is the directorial debut from Chris Nash, who has done a handful of short films, and he's helmed a segment in the ABCs of Death anthology film. Now, this film popped up on my radar because people on film Twitter were reveling in the brutality of it, the gore. They were talking about how queasy it was making them. It's the intensity of the kills, and naturally it caught my ear, and I thought, I have to check this out. And I did. So, what did I think?
In a Violent Nature won't be a film for everyone, and that's not because of how blood-soaked the film is, but because it's not quite like other slashers in recent memory. It's very slow, to the point many people are calling it boring, but I don't think that's fair. The film follows the killer Johnny as he returns from the dead to wreak havoc on the campers and retrieve something that was taken from him. Now, the camera paces along behind him as he plods through the woods, one methodical footfall at a time, and it does a really good job of building tension between his victims, as moving from A to B may show up on screen as a simple tromp through the woods, but the atmosphere is growing with each step. Rather than so many other forest-dwelling slashers where the killer disappears and reappears, we don't have to guess, how did he get there? What did he do between? The film shows us, and I'm really unable to think of another film that does something like this, much to the director's credit.
It's a very simplified and stripped down slasher, and I kind of love that about the film. There are no difficult rules to remember about the killer. There are no steps to take about how to defeat the monster. There's no experts coming in from Zoom or Skype or a phone call. It's just a man on a mission, and I love the simplicity of that. It's pure, distilled slasher. Now, there's your typical clueless campers and characters and whatnot. It's a slasher film. It has those tropes. But there's one character in the film that does something so humane and so rational. It was incredibly refreshing to see such a reaction. It was like watching a real human being for once in a horror film and not some just typed out archetype. It was wonderful to see that.
In a Violent Nature was also shot in an aspect ratio of 1:33:1, which is incredibly uncommon for a lot of modern films, especially horror. Now, you'll see it from time to time in films that use it as an artistic motif, usually signifying a sense of claustrophobia or alienation, and I think that's really fitting here. The campers, unbeknownst to them, are trapped in the woods with a lumbering serial killer, and the woods themselves already have a natural way to make people feel boxed in, far from salvation and safety. And the camera work is tight and thoughtful. There's purposeful blocking and framing here, and I absolutely adore it when stuff like this is found in smaller budget horror films, especially slashers coming out of my neck of the woods, pun not intended. The cinematography was done by Pierce Dirks, who also did camera work for 2018's Mandy and 2016's The Void, two really underappreciated films in their own respect. And there are so many long, single unbroken takes with the camera just lazily panning from left to right. It's a really beautiful slasher, which I found most surprising. There's also no score in the film. It's just your standard Foley and nature sounds. It's a great sounding film, by the way. The kills have so much more weight to them now that they don't have to fight over a soundtrack or a composed score. The violence is crunchy, wet, and full-bodied, and you just love to hear that in a film like this. It really stands out.
With how well Chris Nash handles himself in a forest and with a lumbering killer and over-the-top creative gore-filled kills, I think the next natural step is for him to direct the next installment of the Friday the 13th franchise, and like I said on Twitter, I'm not going to be quiet about that. I want that so badly. Chris Nash has crafted something so unique with this film, and it resonated with me, and I really liked it. It feels like an art house slasher. It's a patchwork of other great little aspects from other different film genres, and it, for me, worked so very well on so many different levels, and that's one of my favorite things about this film. It is the most interesting horror film I've seen this year so far. My recommendation comes with an asterisk at the bottom. It is not a balls-to-the-wall slasher film that you'd expect with something like Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween 4, any of the Friday the 13th sequels. It's a slow-burning atmosphere, tension-building with bursts of extreme violence thrown in. The director took inspiration from filmmakers such as Terrence Malick and Gus Van Sant, and if you know their names and you're familiar with their work, you know what you're going in for. So if you didn't get a chance to see it in theaters, it's available on digital to rent or to own right now, and it will be on Shudder later this year. I'm Dylan, and I have movies.